Folks, week one of the NHL season was an absolute blast, but now it has come and gone, and we've seen the starts for every single NHL team and every single NHL player. But what are the biggest stories throughout the entire league, and what do I think of the NHL season so far? Well, make sure you watch till the end because we're going to be overreacting to a bunch of big stories at the start of the season. And of course, hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this. Obviously, it's just the start, but a ton of new content coming this year that you won't want to miss. Now, of course, before we get into the actual overreactions, it does need to be said we are 3 games into this NHL season, so these are just overreactions. A lot of these could just be contradicted a couple of weeks in the future, but I want to get my thoughts out at the start of this NHL year after week 1 to see where the league is at. Well, let's get started with the overreactions so far this season. Going to a player that's only played 2 games this year so far, but has looked phenomenal in Jack Hughes, and the potential of him being in the Art Ross conversation right now. Through 2 games, Jack Hughes has 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points, 10 shots on goal, 58% expected goals for percentage, and this is with New Jersey not even having the hottest start in the world through those 2 games. They look solid offensively, but not incredible either, and I think there's still another tier for New Jersey to enter, but Jack Hughes already is driving the bus, has looked incredible, and those 5 points look great too, but it's also the missed opportunities as well. There's been quite a few chances that he hasn't been able to bury, and once he does, those points are going to look even better. And you look through the double scoring, of course, right now, Jack Hughes, number 1. You got his line mates in Brot, number 2, and Tyler Toffoli at number 5. But again, the chances that this line has generated have been monstrous. They're going to get a lot more goals in the future and even more luck on top of it. But so far, they've been carrying New Jersey on offense. Now let's go to the next overreaction here onto the Ottawa Senators and a player that has had a blistering start to the season in Jake Sanderson. And when you look at it in the Sens scoring so far, you can see, of course, Jake Sanderson 5th in scoring, or at least tied for 4th. Right there with other 2020 draftee Tim Stützle. But so far, Sanderson has had an incredible start to the season, man. 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, has been eating up minutes and looking the best he's ever looked offensively. So far, he has a 4.13 5-on-5 expected goals for per 60, which is first in Ottawa and among the best in the entire NHL among defensemen. So far, Jake Sanderson has been creating chances on a different level, more than I've ever seen him at any level. And this is U22 scoring in the entire NHL this year. And you can see, of course, Jake Sanderson tied for first place with players like Stützle, McTavish, Connor Bedard, and up on that top level of U22 scoring. And again, it's the chances as well generated. This isn't just a player that's gotten lucky so far, has put up a point per game as a D. He is putting up the offensive results as well as the background play, the little tiny details. He has improved so much in the area since he was drafted, and so far to see him worth a point per game, it's definitely deserved. He is going to have a monster year this season, folks, and is looking to already get off the ground running. Now let's go to the next overreaction here, actually still the Ottawa Senators, and this one is fascinating because for my next overreaction, it seems like Mateo Joseph might not get traded after all of Ottawa. After an incredible preseason, which had Joseph looking stellar, he has continued that success out of the regular season and is looking amazing with Ottawa so far. In 3 games, has 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points, and already is almost about to match his goal total from 56 games last year. It seems like so far Joseph has not just played himself out of, having less of a price for Ottawa to trade him, but potentially being traded at all. It seems like at this point, if I'm Ottawa, Joseph might not be the guy to trade if you're going to offload cap to sign Pinto to get everybody back. It seems like Joseph might be a non-negotiable right now. And in fact, going on to another player that could be traded, it seems like it might be Dominik Kubalik, who on the flip side has not had the greatest start to his time with Ottawa this year. In 3 games, has 0 points. Hasn't really looked all too impactful, especially 5-on-5. So basically the big issues of Kubalik's game have been the biggest issues with Ottawa so far. And it seems like the expendable player could be Kubalik in the end. He could be the guy that frees up the cap for Shane Pinto in the end. Maybe we see an Eric Brandstrom trade as well, potentially. But it seems like for Mateo Joseph, he has saved himself another day, another season with Ottawa. And so far, this start was looking incredible for him. Now let's go to the Vancouver Canucks, and one story that has really surprised me so far this year for the best reasons is Nils Höglander, who seems to be off to an incredible start with Vancouver through his first 2 games. The 22-year-old Swede, who was drafted 40th overall by the Canucks back in 2019, seems to finally have, again, another solid season in the NHL under his belt. You can see right now, so far for the 2 games, and Canucks scoring, he is 5th right now with 1 goal, 2 assists for 3 points. And in the last game for Vancouver, Nils Höglander was out there in the last few minutes defending a lead, and it seems like Rick Tocchet has really given him responsibility, has given him trust within that lineup, and that is incredible to see. So far, Höglander has played incredible, though, is deserving of those points, but that overall game has taken some bigger next steps, and it seems like that maturity at the NHL level has finally returned, which is great to see after a couple of seasons of kind of inconsistent play. With Höglander, he seems to be back in the Canucks lineup and solidified in that spot, and the confidence is just electrifying. And you look at that defensive play so far in Vancouver of Nils Höglander, and you look at the expected goals against per 60. Right now, Nils Höglander is 6th best on the team with a 2.44 rate, which for a younger forward, especially in the position of Nils Höglander, is pretty impressive to see so far. He's in that top tier for the Canucks defensively as a forward, and that is great news. It seems like the responsibility that Tocchet has given him has paid off. I would also be remiss if I mentioned this, but man, give Elias Pettersson every single award under the sun. This is 5-on-5 right now, and Elias Pettersson has a 4.25 expected goals for per 60, as well as a 0.88 expected goals against per 60. That is an incredible, unheard of rate for a forward for any player in the NHL. So far, Pettersson is leading the Canucks in expected goals for per 60, is insane in expected goals against per 60 as well. I mean, that start to the season, we expected it, but Pettersson continues to be a beast. And dang it, a top 5 center in this league. I said it last year, and it continues to be true. Now, going on to the next overreaction here, this is a team that I predicted to miss the playoffs. That was a hot take to many, but so far their start has been incredibly disappointing, and that is the Buffalo Sabres. You look at the league-wide standings, and of course, Buffalo has only played 2 games, but in those 2 games, they've only scored 3 goals, have allowed 8 for a -5. This is a team, especially though, that their offense will be the thing that really gets them going. And so far, it's been a detriment to them. Of course, we saw in the first game just how much they got stalwarted by New York. And then, of course, in the next game, they got a face-off against the Islanders, which is pretty much the worst matchup for them with the trap style the Islanders bring. And even though that game was much closer for them, and of course, had a disallowed goal and everything, which turned the tide, for Buffalo, they still weren't good enough. And these 2 games have been especially worrying. But here's the thing with Buffalo is even the goals they've scored haven't come from their huge players necessarily. I mean, Zach Benson and Casey Middlestat lead the team right now in points, with Zach Benson not being a surprise whatsoever. Absolute stud here. But you go down the list and you got players like Jordan Greenway who have scored goals, of course. Players like Middlestat and JJ Peterka, and that's great to see. But then you go down the list and Tage Thompson is scoreless. Dylan Cousins has looked absolutely brutal this season. You got players like Jeff Skinner who haven't scored as well. Alex Tuck. And a lot of those players that you would assume would be scoring goals haven't been scoring goals. Now, the good news is that once those guys eventually get back to their form, that hopefully those depth guys who have played well will continue to play well. But at the same time, it feels like it might be a little bit of a step back potentially for those top stars in Buffalo, which would be bad news for the rest of the team, considering how much they carried them to a close spot last year. But let us know, are the Sabres actually going to turn this around? Are they going to look a lot better throughout the rest of the year? Or is this a sign of things to come? I obviously predicted them to miss the playoffs, and so far, that's not looking too bad. Now, let's go to a team that has been even more disappointing, and this team is actually crazy to think about with how bad they have been, and that is the Seattle Kraken. We looked at this earlier with Buffalo, but for Seattle, they played one more game than Buffalo, and it's even more embarrassing. In 3 games, they have 2 regulation losses with a overtime loss, and you can see 2 goals scored, 9 goals allowed, -7, which besides Edmonton is the worst in the entire league. Boy, Seattle, it's been brutal their start to the year, especially considering how solid they've been, of course, last season. I expected them to take a little bit of a step back, but so far, it's been awful for them. Now, it's interesting because of the actual expected goals. They haven't looked too bad. This, of course, being expected goals for per 60, and they're 18th in the league. And expected goals against per 60, of course, this is 5-on-5. They're 20th in the league. Actually, if you put it the other way, they're 13th best in the NHL. So 5-on-5, it seems like behind the scenes they've been playing pretty well, but the results have just not been there. They got stumped by the Vegas in their first game. They got a brutal shutout defeat versus the Nashville Predators in their second game, and lost another brutal one against the St. Louis Blues. In that time, of course, only scoring 2 goals. So the team scoring is not going to look very pretty, but it doesn't look pretty. There is one player on this team that doesn't have a minus, and that is Will Borgen, and he's just a 0. It's just even. And you look throughout the entire team, and it's just disappointing player after disappointing player so far. Vince Dunn, with a -5 through 3 games, only has 1 point. Jared McCann, only 1 point. Matty Beniers, scoreless through 3 games so far. And players, of course, like Wenberg, Burakovsky, Gord, who should be consistent scorers, haven't been so far. Now, for Seattle, again, those underlying numbers don't look bad, so they will probably eventually go back down to normal levels. But in the Pacific Division, which has already looked so competitive, Vancouver's getting off to a great start. For teams like Edmonton, for teams like Seattle that started off rough, that could have major implications for seeding down the line. Of course, it's obvious, but it needs to be said, points in October are the same as points in April and March. And for these teams that might have razor-thin margins, especially like Seattle, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Next up on the docket, of course, I think we do have to talk about Alex DeBrincat and the Detroit Red Wings, with Alex DeBrincat really leading the way so far in terms of Red Wings scoring. The offseason acquisitions, at least this last year, paying pretty big dividends so far, with Alex DeBrincat 3 goals, 4 points, looks right at home with his hometown team. JT Compher as well, 3 points in 2 games, and Daniel Sprong continues to be an absolute legend with his 5-on-5 goals. But Alex DeBrincat specifically has looked stellar so far with Detroit, has been leading them in so many different categories. 3 even strength points as well for 2 games. The DeBrincat edition seems to be paying off in droves for Detroit. So far, this Red Wings team has generated a lot in just a pure offense, but you can see DeBrincat 5-on-5 right now is 5th on the Red Wings with a 4.33 rate, which is still fantastic. I mean, if you individualize that, that is pretty great. So far, Detroit has been having a lot of scoring chances, though, so it doesn't look as good with that 5th overall placement. But he's also putting up some pretty good defensive results, too, and some good behind-the-scenes defensive play. So far with DeBrincat, all the problems that he had in Ottawa seem to be gone, and he's back to the DeBrincat we know and love, man. Finally, he's back. Now let's go on to the last big overreaction for today, and this is one that might not be an overreaction with how important the first little start of the season is for the Tampa Bay Lightning, but that is the Tampa Bay Lightning and how inconsistent they've looked so far this season in ways kind of looking a little bit washed. Now you can see they started out their season with a 5-3 win versus the Nashville Predators, but to me, a pretty decent chunk of that game in the second half, they were getting outplayed, and those power play goals really did come to save them. And they again had 2 big games here against Detroit and Ottawa, away on the road. 2 big games against huge Atlantic Division opponents, teams that will be fighting for those spots right alongside them. And both games were just dominated by the other teams, with the Red Wings winning 6-4, and that score looking a lot closer than it actually was, and the Senators winning 5-2, also having a brilliant game, Ottawa having their best game of the season against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But to me, it's a little bit of a consistent theme so far that 5-on-5 play hasn't been all too special at all. And when you consider, of course, the goaltending injuries, so far it's been brutal. And so far in these first 3 games, they've allowed 14 goals. That's not a coincidence either. Now, it's interesting the way they've played and the results they've gotten so far, because when you look at the goals they've scored 11, while 6 of them have come on 5-on-5. So you've had 5 power play goals so far, but still 6 5-on-5 goals through 3 games isn't the worst. And let's look at that league-wide expected goals. This is all 5-on-5 stats here, and you don't want to be at the top. When you look at expected goals for per 60, these are the worst teams generating offense so far in the NHL season, with Tampa Bay 5-on-5 being the 5th worst with 1.97 per 60 minutes. Then you have the goals against, which you also don't want to be at the top. They're only behind Columbus right now in terms of allowing 5-on-5 chances and scoring, with a 3.88 rate per 60 minutes. So far, this team 5-on-5 has been dreadful, and they needed to be at a great tier with Vasilevsky injured to have some real success here. That Nashville game seems to so far be a little bit of a fluke this year, and they could have easily have gone down 0-3-3 for the start of the season. So far, Tampa does not look good, but for almost the wrong reasons. It's not even their goaltending that's been disastrous and the worst in the league, even though it hasn't been great. Tampa just hasn't played that well, and that's tough to see. But let us know down below, is Tampa Bay washed? Is this start of the season just a cautionary thing? Will they get back into the playoffs? Let us know down below. And of course, let us know down below what you guys think of the start of the NHL season. What are your overreactions? What are your thoughts so far? What are your predictions? Let us know down below, of course. And if you guys did enjoy this breakdown, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Always beautiful to talk hockey with you guys. And thank you so much for watching all the way through. Let us know, actually, comment down below. I want you guys to put wash, just in all caps, if you ended up watching the entire way through, so I can know who the beauties are, who the legends are. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate y'all. Make sure you, of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online. Get the video out there and click on this card for all my rankings content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.